Why does the Rambam devote so few words to customs?
Some people assume that this is because Rambam was aiming for brevity and clarity, and perhaps mentioning different customs would cause some confusion and indicate all kinds of divisions, whereas the Rambam was trying to present one unified system of Torah. And there is, I think, some truth to that assumption. But in my view, there is a much more profound reason why the Rambam spends so little time discussing minhagim. That is because the essential nature of a minhag is that it is a local phenomenon. As the Mishnah states in Masechet Pesachim, Makom shenagu kach v'kach, there are places where the minhag is to do such and such, and Makom shelo nahagu, and there are places where the minhag is not to do such and such. In other words, a minhag is a local phenomenon. It is something which becomes accepted practice in a certain place, but it is not a hard and fast rule. It is not halakha. And that is why in some places they do consider something to be mutar, permissible, and in other places that same thing is considered to be asur, forbidden. But in fact the halakha is that it's mutar, and that is why it is called a minhag, because those places that choose to regard something as forbidden, even though it is really permissible, they are doing so based on the concept of minhag makom. This is the minhag, this is the custom of our place, of our town, of our locality, etc. Now it follows, therefore, that when Am Yisrael is scattered all over the globe, in 100 different countries, in thousands of different communities, it follows that the Jewish people will, over time, all these different and disparate communities will, over time, develop many different minhagim in many, many aspects of Jewish life, of Torah, of halakha. And this is what we find in most Rishonim, that they discuss very often at great length the different minhagim and practices of different parts of the Jewish world. If we look at many of the Rishonim, particularly the Rishonim from Ashkenaz and Tzarfat, France and Germany, we find that they discuss the minhagim of different communities within their part of the world, that particular part of the Jewish exile. They discuss these minhagim at great length, and they consider them to be very important. And the reason for this also is profound. Why are minhagim important? Because they tend to add strength and cohesion to a community and form a certain basic standard of Jewish practice which allows the communities in those areas to thrive and to consolidate. On the other hand, when it comes to minhagim as well, minhagim are not always, in all cases, a win-win situation. Because if one takes the long view, the historical view, that is to say, if one looks into the future and considers that at some point Am Yisrael will leave the Galuth and will return to Eretz Yisrael to reconstitute its national sovereign existence in Eretz Yisrael, to fulfill its purpose, its destiny as defined by the Torah at the time of Matan Torah, Vatem tiyuli mamlechet kohanim v'roy kadosh. A mamlacha is a kingdom, is a nation, which has a territorial basis, and it involves the national existence of a people as a nation, not as disparate communities. If one considers the Jewish people will return to Eretz Yisrael from the 100 different countries in which they found themselves during the Galuth, and if one simply thinks for a moment, one realizes that there will be a need at such a time to do away with all these different minhagim of all the different Jews in different parts of the world, because it will be necessary now to come up with a new unified system of halakha and minhag for all the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, which eventually will mean for all the Jewish people, because in the end all the Jews will find their way to Eretz Yisrael. And this, I think, was Rambam's take on the question of minhagim. In other words, Rambam understood that everything that's going on in my day, I'm talking about the Rambam's day, 850 years ago, shall we say, everything that's going on in my day, in different parts of the world where Jewish communities exist, all the different minhagim, which the Rambam was without a doubt aware of, Rambam was saying to himself as follows: there will come a time when all this will have to change. In other words, this reality of these different minhagim, which are so important perhaps at this point in time, at this particular point in the Galuth, all this will have to change, all this will actually have to be done away with. And therefore, the Rambam, who was physically and chronologically living in the Galuth 850 years ago, but in terms of his hashkafat olam, in terms of his vision and understanding of what Torah is all about, he was actually living in the future, that is to say, in our time. He was writing his works in halakha particularly for a time when the Jewish people would find their way back to Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, Rambam considered it pretty much counterproductive to discuss at any great length all the different minhagim and different practices and different opinions in every part of the world. Because all this will, of necessity, have to be done away with in order to allow for the creation of a new unified system of halakha and Torah and minhag for all the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, why discuss things that are here only for the moment, which are temporary? In other words, the Rambam, unlike many other Rishonim, viewed his period of history as a passing and brief, fleeting moment in Jewish history, a phenomenon which we have to live through, but it is not something by which we should make our major decisions, and not something that is to be seen as the yardstick for what Torah Judaism should be all about. He viewed the future ingathering and reconstitution of the Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, he viewed that as the true yardstick of the Jewish people's existence and the system which they should follow in order to achieve that goal. And therefore, discussing minhagim, which by definition are going to be different from place to place and from time to time, and which will eventually have to be reconsidered and for the most part largely be done away with in order to make room for a new unified system to allow a Jewish people to exist, as opposed to a collection of communities and individuals without any real cohesion amongst them. In order for this to take place, the Rambam concentrated on the essential halakha, which is obligatory and binding on all at all times. It is not a local phenomenon, it does not depend on the time and the place. And knowing full well that in the future the Jewish people will, on that basis of the essential halakha, be able to and will be required to come up with a new system of minhagim which will be appropriate for that time and for that place. Whereas the minhagim and the practices of the Galuth are by definition temporary, fleeting, and of no real significance when one takes the long historical view. This, in my opinion, is the essential reason for Rambam's approach to minhagim, which is to discuss them as little as possible, only as much as is required.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.